and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The Program Perumahan Rakyat project, or PPR as we know it, is a program that was meant to offer transition housing for the urban poor, with the hope that they would eventually improve their financial standing and graduate to own or rent homes in the private market. Now, it's been more than 2 decades since the PPR project was launched in 2002. Has it met its objectives? Khazanah Research Institute recently published a study of 3,800 households that either rent or own units in 4 PPRs in KL and 1 in Penang. Joining me on the show to discuss this further is Dr Suraya Ismail. She's Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute, where she focuses on housing, cities and urbanization. She's also a member of the panel of experts for the Ministry of Development and Local Government and a council member for both the National Cost of Living Council and National Council of Digital Economy and 4IR. Dr. Suraya, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me again on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Melisa. Thank you.
Okay, let's dive right into this really meaty study, because I want to know right off the bat, in a nutshell, Dr. Suraya, what was it that KRI wanted to understand about households that live in PPRs through the study? I'm curious to know, what was the hypothesis that you wanted to test through the study?
Oh, thank you, Melisa. So we had a hypothesis of if people were left in a squatters area, would they be better off, or should the government intervene and provide formal housing? Because all around cities in Southeast Asia, some government believes in self-help or informal housing as part of shelter, not really relocation of communities into formal housing, and then making that as a shelter provided formally by the government. So we wanted to see whether could the government provide formal housing for the poor community. And in doing that, we must ask 3,800 over households on what is the user satisfaction of living in that unit, living in that complex, as well as a spatial ecosystem. With your lifestyle or standard of living worse off or weakened after the relocation to all these PPRs from your original place of living when you were in the squatters or informal villages all around Kuala Lumpur and Penang? So that was a huge question, and that's why the report was 200 pages. Yes.
So what triggered this question? It seems to me that living in formal housing would definitely be better than in informal housing, in squatters areas, in urban squatters areas. Was that not apparent? Was that not the case in the findings of the study?
Well, I beg to differ, because there are some nice villages in Kuala Lumpur which the government has endorsed it as Kampung Warisan, and that has become a way in which informal housing is still being one of the ways in which shelter is provided for the less the economic those who are less economic with status. Sorry. And there's also this, in Malaysia, we have about 30% of housing which are informal. This
30%.
is not, yes. This is something which is not bad to begin with. This is not something that is bad to begin with, because whenever people are economically vulnerable, they can't get into the formal system yet, so they have Kampung Baru. Last time that was Kampung Baru. You come from outside of city, you go to Kampung Baru, you stay there for a while, and then after that, when you have increased or you have some social mobility, you then go to the formal market. So squatting or perkampungan, informal, has always been the way in which people outside of the city come in and then start a life. And we see this because I've done work in Thailand. I see this in Indonesia. For many reasons, they believe that the self-help or informal sector can help the government in making sure that people have decent houses. So when you relocate people into so back to Malaysia, when you relocate people to PPR, I would imagine that it will be better because that's the objective. So we needed to test that. So we asked those questions, and we saw that the main issue is basically the buildings themselves and the units. There are cases of overcrowding, there are cases of dilapidated molding and a lot of health issues. And of course, I think recently there's also a few studies, not by us, saying that these cramped places and less amenities for the children are creating a lot of mental issues for youth and children. So these are the things we need to evaluate holistically. If the objective was benign or very for the welfare of the poor to be better, are we achieving that? So it's not really a housing issue per se, but more of, did we actually achieve that? We wanted to make sure that people are living in more decent ecosystem, more decent lifestyle when they move into PPRs.
All right. Can we break that down a little bit, all the issues that you talked about, because they're symptoms of an underlying problem, right? So when we talk about overcrowding, in the households that you surveyed, what were some of the issues around overcrowding? Did it have to do with the size of the unit or the number of the members of the household, or just the sheer, I guess, the fact that the designs are all kind of the same, right, for every single household? So, and not every single household is homogeneous.
Yes. So that is the issue. That's the real issue, in the sense that some houses have two in one unit, two per person in one household. Some household have eight. So and then we're not looking at the gender issue for in this household, because then overcrowding would be even worse off. So, but there are underutilized spaces, because, for example, if you have a retired couple, but they still have the same 3 rooms. So these are what we call some improvements that we can make in terms of living spaces, to make sure that the gross floor area of each unit satisfy the needs of the residents that are there. And the other issue is that 1 in 10 of the households that we interviewed have symptoms of disabilities, and none of the PPRs have disability amenities, not even in the toilet. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So what would that mean, though? I mean, when we think about wanting to create spaces that are suitable and decent and quality for these households, then would that mean refurbishing current units to allow for old age and physical disability in the design of the units and complexes?
So definitely, Melissa, we want a total overhaul of the design of all PPR units, in terms of ensuring that it has decent housing standards. These standards, we purposely took buildings that were done 10 years ago, because one of the weaknesses of Malaysian housing policy is that you never do refurbishment to upgrade the quality of the buildings. So one is always upgrade to the newer standards, because standards always change. You must do that. And secondly, multiple gross floor area for different types of households. And thirdly, prepare for old age, because the median age of the household that we interviewed, the Ketua Isi Rumah, is 54 years old. It means they are stuck there. So if you don't have this sort of facilities, this is like an old age type of housing, but with no facilities for old age. And the corridors are so narrow that, if you're in a wheelchair, I don't think you will be able to move in such a way that is comfortable. I'm saying you can go in, but it's not comfortable. And the third thing is that you build stratified building like 17, 18 floors. Ask any building engineer, surveyor, they would tell you that these sort of houses, in terms of the lift capacity, that's the maximum. Yes, that's right. So this design efficiency is very important for social housing, because one of the real issues is that we keep on saying, oh, lifts selalu rosak, lifts are always broken. But if you design for the lift to be used at its maximum capacity, of course it will always rosak. Of course it will break down. So sometimes they say, oh, it's vandalism, it's people don't know how to use it. But if it was designed for its maximum capacity, we had one apartment, that we visited, sorry, one flat. Every day the leaf is broken, and when they call up the ones who should rectify it, by in the middle evening or afternoon, it will be broken again. So can you imagine a 9-year-old child from the 17th floor wanting to go to school 7 o'clock in the morning? Do you think he'll go to school when you have to walk down 17 floors? And there was another case whereby people always, oh, why do they throw sampah from the 17th floor? There's no refuse chute. So you need to bring it all down every single day. So these are
Down. Yeah, and I think you also have to remember the way up, right? So it's 17 floors up as well. One of the things that I learned from your study was the fact that PPRs are built and funded by the federal government, but the maintenance cost is borne by local councils, which I didn't realize the dichotomy there. So help me understand why this is an issue and why this eventually leads to all the problems that PPR households face.
When the one who built the house is not the one taking care of it, you can easily come up with really shoddy material, or I'm not saying they are, but you can really come up with shoddy material or bad design, and then the other group needs to maintain it. So in this way, it's a real case of moral hazard, because the one who builds it is not the one who maintains it. So what we have proposed is a method whereby it's life cycle costing type of building development, because this is a government asset. I know this is federal or PBT or state, but this is a government effort to house the poor. It should be seen as a government asset. It is not being seen as a drain on fiscal policies, not as an asset. But if you maintain it well, if you build well, if you build a design that's efficient, if you build a design that is easy to maintain and easy to clean, you will not have these problems. All our design, I mean, I tell you, I came from Bartlett School, it's way back then. We used to have very good architects going for design competition for social housing, public housing. I want to ask all the architects here, why are they not doing that? Have a good design for those in urban poverty, because if you want people to have social mobility, give them decent shelter. That's another problem that we have when we try to sell this really not very good types of units to the owners. Then you have a case of the poor owners, people who are from a disadvantaged background becomes poor because of maintenance. Maintenance of a 17th floor building is not easy. It's not, especially when the design is bad and maintenance have not been done for the past 20 years.
Okay.
And then you pass it on to the sitting tenants to buy. I think this is a sin.
Okay, that will be even more of a burden. So rather than giving them an asset that can appreciate in value over time, it's actually creating more of a financial drain on them. Can I ask you, for those, so for local councils, I believe the way they keep up with maintenance costs would be through the rent that they charge the PPR households. Is that accurate? Do the rents cover the cost for maintenance and, even refurbishment over a life cycle of a building?
No, the rent does not cover the maintenance, because you see, when we do social housing, it's a bigger agenda of social protection, that
Right.
these are people of a poor background. That's why the filtering was very important. So one of our policies said, how do you decide who should go in? Because if you don't filter it well, then those who shouldn't be there will be there. So if we want to give decent housing for the poor, you shouldn't really have any issues on who does the maintenance, or would the rent cover the maintenance, because this is the under the custodian of the government as part of a social protection regime. Because if not, we'll have the landangan homelessness, and the families will be broken. So a house in the social sector is meant to menjaga kebajikan. So that's very important to put in. And okay, then after that, also in the report, once they've graduated, once they have a certain income where they can be independent, they have achieved certain social mobilities, then how do they graduate? So we did in this study, we collaborated with InSpan, and we did a radius of 10 kilometers. So what is the rent to income ratio? Because what is decent rent is when your rent to income ratio is about 25%. So based on that, we then see that there's no option, very limited. In fact, you can only get like 600 square feet, 400 square feet, which is not sufficient for a family of 4 or 5. So again, you ask them to go out. Some PBTs do ask them to go out because the queue for people coming in is very, very long. And yet, where do they go? And this is the problem with a social strategy that does not look into the alignment of social policies and private sector policies, because there's a gap there. And when people want to migrate, they might be pushed back into social housing. So these are the things that we really have to think about.
Okay, if I may unpack that a little bit. That was a lot of information for me to take. So help me understand. So the people who live in PPR households right now, are they transitionary? Is this transitionary housing as it was meant to be? That means they were in underprivileged, they were in economic need, and then having shelter, perhaps increased their economic prospects, and then moved out. Is that what you're seeing with the households that you surveyed?
We are seeing that they're stuck. We are not seeing the objective being met.
Because the rent and housing prices in the locality is just too expensive.
Too expensive. And some of the people who are living there were put there due to relocation, not due to the income. So when people say, oh, I see a lot of people with 3-4 cars, yeah, they were there because of relocation, because there's two objectives there. So now we are also asking, please put the objectives right. I mean, what are we trying to do social housing for?
Sorry, Dr. Suraya, very quickly, what does relocation entail? When you say they were there because of relocation, what does that mean?
Oh, sorry. So these were the people who were in a Stinggan area, a squatters area, and they might be enjoying quite good income, because not everybody in kampung village in the city is poor. It's not like that. That's not the case. So
when the land needs to be redeveloped,
so they were put into these PPRs. Most of them are poor. Most of them are, because from the research we saw that about 60 to 80% are targeted poor. That's fine, but we do see 26% that can move out. They can move out in terms of they are no longer eligible for the PR because of their income and family income. So, but then they don't want to go out because the options out there is not as affordable as what they're having now.
Okay, so how do we address that? The fact that there is actually no exit strategy for households that live in PPR, and that creates a kind of a backlog queue of the people who may fit into that lower income bracket that needs social housing.
Oh, so one of the things we propose is to have a rental tenancy act. Yes, we did propose for that because rental in our country is not regulated. And you see, I mean, just not just, okay, we can talk about another hour about rental in Malaysia, because look at the quality of homes or rooms that are being let out. Sometimes you have a coffin room and it costs 300 ringgit, 600 ringgit. And these are people who give, renting to make sure that you get the maximum profit. So sometimes I'm angry at developers, sometimes I'm angry at homeowners who basically abuse the system all the time. Sorry. So for this, I believe that regulation is important. I think we do need to regulate the quality of homes and the rental that we put that commensurate with this quality of homes.
Is there something the government can do in terms of helping? I don't know. I'm thinking about maybe giving direct cash transfers to households that have graduated out of that bracket for PPR households to move into the private sector. That way they can kind of get into the private sector and free up that unit for other needy households.
Yes, that is one of our proposition as well, policy options. But we have to get so for example, let's say for example, you have a house that's rental is about 600 or 1,000. So the rent to income ratio that this family can afford is 800. So we give a cash voucher for 200 to top up. But we need the Rental Tenancy Act because there will be property owners who are opportunistic. And then just because they're part of this government scheme, they'll push up their rental to 1,200, and then the vouchers become 400. So this is the reason we need the Rental Tenancy Act in order for these housing vouchers to work. Without the Rental Tenancy Act, I think there'll be a lot of abuses.
Okay. And what can the government do to so beyond that legislation of a Rental Tenancy Act? What about I know that the report touched a bit on market failure, which has led to the issues faced by PPR households. Can you elaborate on how the market has failed them?
So when we look at social housing, we look into who is inside. What is the size of social housing? It doesn't depend on just who is poor. Now that houses are so expensive that even the M40 needs some government assistance. So for us, this is basically due to market failure that the people in the so-called social sector has expanded because they can't access really expensive houses. And we see that if you look at our report, we see that share of households under state social and government assisted affordable housing program. Social housing is not affordable housing program. So I think a lot of people has hijacked this affordable housing type of labels because affordable housing is making housing generally affordable to all income distribution. There's a house for you if you're in B4. There's a house for you if you're in M1, M2, M3, M4. So it's following that median and following your income. So, but if more people are not able to buy houses or rent from the private market, then more people will be within the government assisted program. This is when all our fiscal trajectories will all go berserk because too many people are getting assisted programs from the government. Like here, Pulau Pinang, 85.2% of households are eligible. Kelantan, 76.3%. State governments are going in at a sphere where it should be for the private sector to provide these houses. So I asked a very good question. I think I asked a very good question to the powers that be. You have to have an objective for housing in Malaysia. To what extent do you want the private sector to be able to provide? Is it 80% of a population? Because then 20% will be in social sector. But currently it's not clear because yes, maybe 20% are in poverty and therefore, economic vulnerable. But what about those in the middle M1, M2? Who should cater for that? If it's too unaffordable for them, then they are going for government assisted. You mean 60% of population will be under government help? It's not sustainable. So this is the market failure.
How can government what policy interventions are available in the government arsenal to correct this market failure? Because if like you said 80% of a state population qualifies for government assistance, that's a real problem of the prices of the houses within the locality. So what tools are in the government's arsenal to correct this failure?
So one thing they've started giving what is the what is the affordable housing range following different localities and different income strata. In home, there's not going to be any buyer. 300,000, there will be buyers because that's based on the feasibility study. So one of the in their toolbox is that to use feasibility study, that you must ensure that 80% or maybe more, or maybe 100% of your product from development of that area can supply for the localities there, people living there with the income record that they have there. So we build for the people we have, not for the people we aspire to have. Then I think Malacca is great. So I'm going to talk about states now. Malacca is great because their affordable threshold, I mean, the whole state, it's very affordable. It's about three is affordable. So how they do it is they have basically a strict regulation that if you can produce this sort of houses with these price ranges, you can build in Malacca.
Dr. Suraya, I could easily talk to you for another couple of hours about this. I'm sure this is a topic that we'll come back to time and time again to address, unpack, and discuss further. But I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me today to go through that report. And I would encourage everyone to kind of look at the report on Khazanah Research Institute's website. Just very informative and very meaty to understand what's happening with our PPR projects. Dr. Suraya Ismail, Director of Research at Khazanah Research Institute there, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.